Funken kochte aus Elysium. Wir betreten feuertrunken himmlische dein Heiligtum. Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mode streng geteilt. Alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfter Flügel weilt. Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mode streng geteilt. Alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfter Flügel weilt. In dem großen Hof gelungen, eines Freundes Freund zu sein, wer ein volles Heil errungen, bietet seinen Lohn an. Wer auf nur eine Seele sein wird, auf den Leben hoch, wenn's die Gott, ich stehle meinen Sieg aus diesem Buch.
Hello and welcome, sock puppets, sociopaths, McGoyim, as we're now being called, to another exciting episode of Stream of Consciousness, your weekly dose of all the stupidest news in Australian right-wing politics. I am your host, John McGoyim, Mc/McGowan. We got Brian coming on later. He's back, putting the kids to bed at 8:30, coming in then. And we're going to be talking about the biggest stuff this week, the rise of the Naarmgroids, which is just frankly the greatest meme to come out of Australia, I think ever. It's been killing it online this week. And we're going to talk a bit about that, where it came from, a bit of the discourse around it. We're going to talk about One Nation and their slump in the polls, or alleged slump in the polls at this point. What they're up to or what they're not up to, which Brian's going to cover off on. I'm going to talk a bit about, the history of TLD and some lesser-known TLD news that's happening this week. The final demise of the right faction of the Liberal Party, which is playing out in ICAC right now. And will be happening on, I think the investigation's kicking off on the 27th of July. We're thinking about live streaming it if they don't make me go. Before we get to all that, for my weekly monologue before Brian joins us, my favorite news story this week was Anthony Albanese and Kylie Minogue. And, well, he also got asked about Rhonda Birchmore and Nicole Kidman, which is, it's a hard choice, I reckon. I mean, and Rhonda Birchmore's looking great for, she's 66. She actually came out today. She commented on it. She was real funny. And she basically height-mogged Albo in her comments to Sky News, which I thought was hilarious. I've never met Rhonda Birchmore, but I did see her once when I was getting shit-faced at a bar in Sydney, and I saw her walking past, and I yelled out, "Hey, Rhonda, loved you in Silence of the Hams." And she keeled over laughing, which... You have to be like a Gen X/boomer to get that joke, but Google the movie Silence of the Hams. It was pretty funny. It was a big deal in the 90s for like a week. So I like Rhonda Birchmore. But Albo doesn't. He likes the Pocket Rocket, Kylie Minogue. And yeah, it's caused like a scandal, like a total scandal this week. And on top of that, like he also said that he only has sex with his wife when the Rabbitohs win. He also made a boob joke about the Japanese Prime Minister. Guy was just going off. And, of course, the online conservative slop hive mind wants us all to be incredibly angry about this. I'm not angry about it. I don't really care. What I do care about and what I think is most interesting about it is the media reaction, because it's all been about the media reaction. And if you had gone on the Today Show or Sunrise and made any of these jokes or all three of these jokes, this would not be a story at all. It would have been a one-day story and everyone would have moved on. The reason this is a story is because of where he made the jokes. And he made them on a podcast. And we saw this during the last federal election campaign when he went on Abby Chatfield's podcast. God bless Abby. This visceral backlash from the mainstream media about how dare he spend an hour talking to someone who doesn't have a press gallery pass. How dare he engage with the media, with a media outlet and a journalist or a content creator, and not someone with a bachelor's degree from UTS or Charles Sturt University? That's what's really in the background of all this, and this is what I don't think people are getting, because there's been a lot of stuff happening in the background this week, lesser stories, which give you a really clear indication of what's really happening and what's really driving so much of the news in our country right now. And what we're seeing is the death throes of the mainstream media, played out in slow motion, and in some cases not even in such slow motion, right? I mean, starting when Karl Stefanovic, pulled the pin on, when Nine pulled the pin on Karl, or at least insofar as it wasn't confected by Karl Stefanovic last week. right? These guys are dying. And they are terrified of losing their relevance. They're terrified. I mean, they don't care about the money. I mean, it's not like the guys in the newsrooms and the editors are personally invested in these. Actually, some of them quite significant media companies that don't really care about the economic impacts of a shift in the media ecosystem in Australia. It's that no one's going to listen to them anymore, to the extent they're even listening to them now. So that's what's driving this. And in the discourse around what Albanese said, you see it in the opinion pieces in the big mastheads. You see it in the commentary on TV. They're all questioning whether or not he should have gone on a show like that, just as people on the right questioned if he should have done Abby Chatfield, right? It's not about the message, it's about the medium. Because this is what they're terrified, is new media stripping away what's left of their audiences, stripping away what's left of their tiny little scrap of credibility, stripping away their relevance in the 21st century, which at this point is all but gone. That's what's driving it. You know, you've probably seen in the last week, Labor have, continued to push their nonsensical and ineffective under 16 social media ban. We saw we saw TikTok went to the Anti-Semitism Commission today. We had Meta go on yesterday. We can see what's happening. They are trying to put pressure on the social media companies. They are trying to, in classic Labor form, because it's what the only thing Labor knows how to do when it comes to industry, is they're trying to create a closed shop. They're trying to reduce the influence of social media, reduce opportunities for new media, but it's too late. And I was talking to an analyst this week who told me that he thought the first terrestrial broadcast shutdowns are going to start in 2030. He said he expects it'll be Channel 10 first, and probably every year thereafter we'll see another one. That is, that terrestrial broadcast from the major TV networks will cease because it'll stop being economical, and it'll switch to what pros call BVOD, so broadcast video on demand, kind of thing you get on the shitty apps. I mean, it sucks at the moment. If you've been watching the soccer. Look at how piss poor quality you get on SBS on demand, right? This is where it's going. I mean, whether or not the newspaper mastheads will survive is up in the air. I mean, does Australia really have room for 3 prestige broadsheets? Can that sustain into the future in a world where more bespoke, more niche, more salient and cheaper content exists on Substack, on X, on anywhere else? Can slop, OzTam numbers were out today. Farmer Wants a Wife leading. I mean, can reality slop exist in a world where you can get much better reality slop on YouTube? Right? How are these guys going to continue surviving, and will it be economical to do so? That's what everyone serious in this country is thinking about when it comes to the media right now. And they are massively pushing back on it. They're pushing back on, they're certainly pushing back on the regulations. They're pushing back on the credibility of the social media companies. This week, I mean, in the last 24 hours, they've announced that they're pushing back on AI, which is completely insane. We've seen, they're now starting this like AI institute where they're going to try and regulate and control the growth of artificial intelligence in Australia, which is already one of our biggest growth sectors, with zero help from government. Now, the feedback you get from the AI industry is a lot of this stuff's already been mooted and they don't care about it. The funny thing about why they don't care about it when you talk to them is why. And that's because they go, well, the government doesn't understand it enough to regulate it, which is 100% true. There was a study out today that I think had been commissioned by the government. I saw it on a Newspack tonight. I said like 74% of Australians are now using AI in their workplace. Bullshit. It's 100%. 100% of Australians, if you have a computer in Australia, you are using AI. If you're watching this stream in Chrome, look up in the right-hand corner of your screen where it says Ask Gemini. You're using AI. when you turn on your streaming service and you see what it thinks you should watch today, you're using AI. If you've opened up a Google window, you're using AI. Everyone's now using it. The government thinks it's an app that can be controlled. And, we're going to stop saying AI in the next couple of years. We'll just say computers, because computers will be AI. Right? That's what's coming. And the government is woefully underprepared for it. The mainstream media, who we should rely on to, inform us about this stuff, does not want it to happen. Because AI is going to make them lose their jobs. AI already makes a better journalist. Grok already does a better job of giving me my news every day than a $1,000 a month media monitoring service. Right? If it wasn't for the magazine, I'd probably cancel my AFR subscription. And also I need to be able to troll Mark DiStefano online. Rowan's disappointed I haven't mentioned Neil the Seal yet. Yeah, I mean, we might actually have to get onto that today. That's if you're Tasmanian in the chat, and I see some guys talking about whether or not I am. Yeah, that's huge news down here. The government actually put out someone from NRE, from Natural Resources, I think it was yesterday, that said they thought they might have to euthanize him. And I thought, what the fuck, man? Who would even say that? We could have Harambe 2.0 down here in Tasmania. We have to go to the mattresses for Neil the Seal. Kurt in the chat, he's saying there's an accelerationist case for euthanizing Neil. I do see what you mean. I mean, Tasmania is probably lagging behind the other states in terms of like reactionary zeal. So yeah, something like that will just, it'll be TLD. Tasmania is the last place TLD hasn't touched. So maybe that'll be what triggers it. Rob Dobalina says he has a warm smile. Euthanize whoever's talking about euthanizing him. He does, isn't he? He's just such a nice looking seal. Good for him. Must be a reason he keeps coming back. I read somewhere he's molting, and that's why he runs around and he bangs into things, because he's trying to strip his skin off or something. Yeah, Green Goblin says Neil would be a sock puppet. See, this is what happens when I try to talk about something serious and you guys want to talk about a seal. Brian's still a ways off. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Albo. I mean, also tell us in the chat who you think you would run. And notice they did what was it? Fuck, marry, date as their thing, instead of the traditional fuck, marry, kill, right? That struck me as suggesting that Albo knew it was coming and they'd made them change it. Because he does fuck, marry, date. That's not a thing. Green Goblin just said Tanya on Sunrise trying to defend him was pretty lol. I mean, actually, and that was a good Mark DiStefano win this week, who has actually had a lot of wins this week, I got to admit. He actually raised that and said, if Albanese was going to apologise to anyone, it should be Tanya Plibersek for hanging her out to dry on TV this week. But I mean, it just goes to show like how irrelevant is TV now, right? More people watch that podcast. I don't know actually who the podcast was even with. She looked fun though. She looked kind of cute. If any, maybe Abby is, as she has her breakdown. Maybe I could get super into her. But there are cool podcasts in Australia. I'm surprised. I'm surprised we're not seeing more of this. I think there's a resistance, and particularly from government ministers, there is a resistance to go on them. Right. And the resistance is from the fact that they're just not very conversationalists. They're not good conversationalists. They're hard to listen to. They're not interesting. They're used to reading scripts and like talking points, and they really struggle to be personally engaging. This is true for a lot of politicians. Amel RT9X said, I don't care what Albo said, but if that was a conservative guy, we know the reaction would be 20 times worse. Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, I want to see a conservative guy do it. I want to see a conservative guy come out and say it. Like, if anyone had a spine, they would. I don't know, who cares? It's a funny joke, right? Rhonda Birchmore took it in stride. I don't think we've seen a reaction from Kylie yet. And I mean, is Nicole Kidman even real anymore? Or is she a hologram owned by one of the movie studios? So we haven't seen anything from them. The other thing was like they were trying to drum up this whole how offended the Japanese would be thing. But come on, the Japanese say like offensive shit all the time. It's the most offensive country on earth. Like, it's probably not even the most offensive thing that's been said on Japanese television this week. Like, you know, the Japanese news on NHK had to stop running a video of, you know, 4 naked schoolgirls rolling in a bathtub full of eels to cross to the news about Albanese. Like, no one's going to care about a joke about Sanae Takeshi's melons in Japan. It's just ludicrous. Of course, the other big news this week is that China launched a missile around us. Speaking of foreign Asian countries, it's bad. But I mean, what are our guys going to do about it? They're weak as piss. Is the short answer. They put out a sternly worded statement. That was it. If that had been me, I would have shot it down. If I was Prime Minister, that's what I would have done. Do you know we can do that? It's a crazy thing, right? I mean, Australia's entire military doctrine seems to be like pretending to be a small bean that is a middle power that can't really do anything. We have F-35s. The radar on the F-35 is designed for marking ballistic missiles in the boost phase. We have ordnance on our ships that can intercept a ballistic missile. Like, if Albanese and Richard Marles just wanted to completely mog Xi, I mean, the only thing we probably couldn't do is find the submarine, but as if the Americans would have told us. Like, if they had have called Marco Rubio and said, hey, you want to see something cool? He would have told us where the submarine was. Like, the State Department would know exactly where that submarine was. And we could have shot down the missile. And we could have just said, well, we didn't know. We saw a missile, so we shot it down. You know, that would be fucking hilarious. Right? I've been saying for a while that every time one of the Chinese spy ships comes down, we should just put one of the F-35s up, and then the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister should go and do a press conference and run the video from like the FLIR vision of us locking onto it. Because Australia, this is the crazy thing, Australia has the world's second biggest fleet of stealth fighters. Isn't that a crazy statistic? I mean, if you just said to anyone off the top of your head, who has the second most stealth fighters in the world? I mean, obviously everyone would say America has the first. It's obvious. America, I think, has like 10 times as many F-35s as we do. They've even got them in like National Guard units and stuff now. But we got 72 of those things. The British have got like 40. I think the Israelis are due to get to above 70, but they haven't got them all yet. We got heaps of these things. Like, and China's stealth capabilities are still up in the air, much like the Russians, with, I think, is it the MiG-27, their stealth offering, which they refuse to use in Ukraine because they don't know that it's not going to get shot down, and they don't want to deal with the embarrassment of losing one. You know, they don't sortie. All these like fifth generation non-American stealth fighters don't sortie because no one wants to find out that they don't work, which is a very strong likelihood. So we could have pulled that off. We could have done it. It would have been enormously cool. The Chinese would have been super pissed off. I reckon they should have done it, and then they should have told them to send an invoice. And we could have said, yeah, look, the first time you launch a missile into our territory, which it is our territory, by the way, it's within our non-nuclear zone in the South Pacific. The first time we'll pay for the missile. The second time we're not paying. Yeah, we should have just done that. Fuck them. They won't, though. Well, they would never do. They would never in a million years would the Australian government do something that cool. But maybe in 2028, a different government. I mean, it's that seems to me that would be the kind of thing Pauline Hanson would do if she was cool. We don't know if she's cool yet, but if she was, start shooting down Chinese missiles just for funsies, you know. Mind you, most of my positions on foreign affairs are just me saying we should launch missiles and things. I think a couple of weeks on the stream, I was saying we should solve the tobacco firebombing crisis by launching missiles at exiled Turkish and Lebanese gangsters. Taranango says, imagine wartime Hanson Kino. Yeah, 100%, man. Someone's got to do it. So Walmart Golem says, can we save the missiles for Modi, please? Yeah, I mean, I don't think they got any ballistic missiles to shoot at us. So, yeah. Before Brian gets here, he's going to talk about One Nation. We're going to talk about Rise of the Naarmgroids. There's been some very interesting news out of New South Wales this week about the ICAC. It's interesting for people not enmeshed in New South Wales right-wing Liberal politics for two reasons. And like, even if you're in Victoria, the main reason we should be interested in it is because, well, they're not doing a royal commission into the CFMEU, which is real corruption. They're doing it into, I think, like 4 lads who tried to stack a bunch of branches using property developer money, allegedly, and they got busted. I had to call my lawyer last week just because there's a very slim chance, I don't think it's ever going to happen, but there's like a very slim chance that it crosses. Thank God I'd quit the Liberals by the time this happened. There's a slim chance I could get mentioned, and so I was briefing the lawyer on it. I said, the only thing I want you to do in cross-examination is I just want you to get up and ask these guys, how many of these stacks have quit to One Nation now? Because this is what ICAC are doing. They're flogging a dead horse. The Liberal Party's over. The right wing of the Liberal Party's certainly over, right? What these guys did, the so-called reformers, was the last hurrah. It was the last-ditch effort to claw back some of the party for Conservatives. It failed. We know it failed because look around. So the idea that ICAC should, that there is a shred of public interest in going after a failed branch stack for a failed party that is barely relevant. That is utterly insane. Green Goblin says, Damien Tudorhope, good guy, though. I mean, an enormously good guy, one of the best men I ever worked with. And for me, it's kind of personal, the whole thing. I mean, for me, it started in 2013, 2014. And it's really the culmination of a decade and a half long attack by the New South Wales establishment, the legal establishment, the media establishment, the lovies who get the good right invites to the right art gallery openings. It's been an attack on them, on a very small number of Catholic conservatives. That's all it's ever been. Ironically enough, corruption amongst the establishment in New South Wales is so endemic that every time they have ever gone after Catholic conservatives, they have accidentally got one of their own. When they came after my former boss and our friends like Mike Gallagher and Chris Harcher in 2014, they accidentally scalped the premier who supported them. When they went after another bunch of ratbag right-wing councillors 5-6 years later, they found out that another left-wing premier was sleeping with a moderate MP. So, I mean, I think the great irony of this ICAC investigation, as much as I think it's horse shit and as much as I think it's not in the public interest and it'll achieve nothing, I guarantee you that at some point in the process of trying to scalp a bunch of irrelevant conservative Catholics who really should have quit the Liberal Party years ago, I bet you in the process of doing that, the New South Wales legal fraternity is going to get another own goal. And if I was, one of the more, optically appropriate Liberals in New South Wales, I'd be shitting bricks right now. If I was one of these women on all the good boards, if I'm one of the, the silks, maybe sooner or later they'll actually find out how crooked some of these journalists are. But this is what's happened every time. Every time they've gone in there thinking they're finally going to put a bullet into the mix, it comes back to bite them on the ass, And in the process, they've achieved absolutely nothing. Nothing. Some good men lost their jobs. The party was worse for it. The state was worse for it. You know, and it didn't even work to the extent in 2014 that the Liberals would even lose the next election. Barry O'Farrell went. 11 guys went. They won the next election. They lost one seat. Thank God, too, because the state went on to bigger and better things. But the ICAC's not going to stop. So good luck to him, and good luck to all the fellas involved in it. I'm thinking of you. We've had a few requests to talk about Drew Pavlou and his... Yeah, and what another weird thing, like a weird media thing this week. We've got... did you see, like, all these big US streamers and, like, content accounts, big US ones, are just piling on to Drew, the fact Drew has a girlfriend. And... like, it's so weird to see them, like, say who she is, and like as if we're Bad Empanada tweeted it before, and it was like Bad Empanada just assuming that. Hang on, I'll pull the tweet up because it's funny. Yeah, like Bad Empanada just assuming everyone knows what a Labor councillor is. I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, oh, I'm just closing down a window, but bizarre. Poor Drew went to the US. We invented the Naarmgroid meme, and now his girlfriend's been doxxed. I feel bad for him. And good for him for having a girlfriend. Man, half of you guys should get girlfriends. Like, everyone should get one. They're way better. And Ben says, let's not forget John was declared a good boy by ICAC in that time. Specifically, the ICAC declared that I did not lie. They did not say that I didn't do anything bad. They simply said that I did not lie. And to this day, the other party in that, he still professes his innocence. Both guys that I stuck the knife into do. And you know what? As the years have gone by, any animosity I might have had towards them is completely gone. I wish I hadn't have done it. I wish that had never happened. You know, a little known fact. I mean, that was over $3,000. Right, when you see those pictures of me walking into ICAC that day, looking fabulous, by the way. Like, I wish I could look that good again. That investigation, that was over a paper bag with a few $1,000s in raffle tickets in it. That was it. Like, ruined Gary Edwards' career. I can't remember the name of the boy, the staffer whose career it fucked up. Although I think he ended up getting back on council later, so I mean, I think things ended up going better for him in the end. You know, and that was not even one of the dumbest ones. Another friend of mine in New South Wales, a guy whose campaign I worked for in 2007, a guy called Craig Bowman, another fantastic guy, one of the best candidates that we ran. Actually, in 2007, he was the only Liberal to win a seat off Labor, which was pretty incredible because that was a shit show of an election. They did Craig over taking property developer donations on the basis that Craig was a property developer. So the crime was he took donations from himself. Insane. This was the kind of shit that they were scalping guys over. The whole thing has just become performative nonsense for cat ladies and I Heart ICAC tote bag havers. And I can't help but feel like maybe they're just doing it because it'll probably be Kate McClymont's last one. Oh, she's not going to get another one. God knows how old she is. Maybe that's why the ICAC are going down the rabbit hole. The guy leading it's an ex-Labor lawyer. Make of that what you will. His name is Fabian. Normative determinism, I'm thinking. This guy said, I can't say his name, Theophilus Bartholomew says Asian GFs are a good high IQ alternative to whatever is going on with white women these days. Well, that's exactly the reason why I started doing it. When I do the Grok IQ test on girls' social media pages, Asian girls always come back like 20 points higher, like every single time. Especially because they're all doing STEM courses at uni. So I can totally see why guys do it. They're smart. They are smarter, 100%. So nothing but respect for guys who lock them down, because you can probably see through your bullshit. Yeah. What else we got going on in the chat, guys? Skull is telling everyone to get an Asian GF. So we've got a lot of Asian GF supporters in the chat. Bowring says also Federal Committee on Electoral Matters is trying to force brethren to appear and give evidence about their involvement in 2025 campaign. Yeah, I saw that one. Again, like it is considered an administrative crime in Australia to be a Christian. Like I don't mean to get as hyperbolic about it as a lot of other people on the right do, but like they will come for you over it. One of the things Brian and I are probably going to talk about tonight has been some of the, the ancillary dramas we're hearing are going on inside One Nation. But like a lot of it stems from the fact that, I mean, it's very clear that there's already factions emerging inside One Nation. And one of the factions is the significant number of conservatives in this country who've been attracted to One Nation because of the complete collapse of the other traditionally conservative Christian parties. I mean, remember that kid, the cool kid from the last election campaign, Malachi? And then, like, Family First ditched him for just saying things that were just ordinary Christian conservative things. Like, that was really the writing on the wall for organized Christian parties. I mean, as the rancid failure of the ACL to actually successfully campaign on anything was probably another one. And so I think you've seen this massive drift away from those kinds of parties and like grassroots organizing by Christians to One Nation, because I think they just assumed that One Nation would support them and their causes, because, between when they were at 5% and when they've now got to 29% and now gone back again, like One Nation just kind of threw the kitchen sink, went this kitchen sink approach on political ideology, and said if there's a conservative ideology in the country, they'd back it. But the one thing they haven't really got that into is a lot of the Christian stuff. And I think, I mean, look, a lot of the things that I dislike most about One Nation are the things that are probably strategically the smartest. And I think One Nation's studious avoidance of Christian conservatism and, playing with the occasional little, bout of degeneracy in their various joke candidates with their disordered and very non-conservative personal lives, I think for them is a hedge against this stuff. Because, if they went all in the way the liberal conservatives had in the past, this is what happens to you, right? They'll put the exclusive brethren into a committee and quiz them, and then they'll make laws to stop them having their religious freedoms. They'll target religious conservatives in your party and charge them with corruption if they can over a few $1,000s in raffle tickets. Like, that's for a significant chunk of the Australian, like the real political establishment in this country. The bureaucracy, academia, the media. Christianity is the problem for them. They've reacted to something like George Pell far more viscerally than anything else. That turned out not to be true as well. I mean, this is the other thing about a lot of their attacks on Christians, is they later turn out not to be true. And no one cares. Like, the media doesn't care. They'll just keep doing it. Pussy. Is that pussy policy? Yeah. Is that what's the PFP? Oh, ballet shoes. Saw me coming. One Nation doesn't have an active state. Well, I think you mean like an active state branch. This is something that really frustrates me, is that One Nation does seem pretty ambivalent about the state elections. Right? As someone else in the chat pointed out, they don't even have a state leader in Victoria yet. The election's in November. I just don't think they care. I mean, I was saying to a client this week, like I referred to it as like crikey coded when someone thinks that the federal government is the most important government in the country, because it's absolutely not. The federal government is the most important in the country to the press gallery, but it's the most important insofar as some key policy areas like defense and immigration. But for the overwhelming majority of Australians and for the day-to-day interests of the overwhelming majority of Australians, state government is far more important than the federal government. You will have 1,000 times more interactions with the state government than you will with the federal government. In fact, for a significant chunk of Australians, the only interaction you'll ever have with the federal government is doing your taxes once a year and applying for your some seniors benefits, applying for a passport. But you're born in a state government facility, in a state government regulated facility. You drive every day on state government roads. You catch a state government train to work. You'll be arrested by state government police if you step out of line. Your kids go to state government schools. If you get sick, you go to state government hospitals. Ben just said Medicare. Yeah, but as the federal government keep reminding us, all Medicare is a card and an FPOS machine. The nurses are from the state government. The doctors are from the state government. The beds are from the state government. The buildings are from the state government. And if you're in business, sure, tax is a problem, but I haven't had anywhere near as many business people complain to me about the CGT issue and about negative gearing as they've complained about their inability to get projects approved by state governments, the frustration of dealing with state governments, the bureaucratic ineptitude of some state government departments, overburdening regulations, red tape, right? State government is the most important thing in the country. And, when a state government is doing well, the country does well. And we've seen that, no better example of that than under the Liberals in New South Wales between 2011 and 2022. Right, a golden age for New South Wales. If you're in New South Wales right now and you drove to work on West Connects or North Connects, or you caught the metro into town, Jesus, I had to go to New South Wales hospitals twice in the year before I moved back down to Tasmania. Honest to God, if I got sick, I'd probably go back to New South Wales. Sure, there are issues. There's issues everywhere, but on that stuff, New South Wales is the best place to live. It's the best place to do business in many cases, right? When we've seen, one thing that, I worked on when I was in government in New South Wales was on law enforcement. Look at those crime statistics from 2011 to 2022. There was never been a safer time in the history of New South Wales than in that period. There were heaps of cops. They had a lockdown on organised crime. They had Task Force Raptor. They were clearing out bikies. There were no fucking fire bombings there. If a kid was walking down the streets with a machete in some problem suburbs in New South Wales in that period, they would have sent in the bear cat and the water cannon. One of the best places to live. And all it takes is a few changes. All it takes is for people to stop concentrating on it. The whole thing falls apart. No major infrastructure projects announced by Labor since coming to office in New South Wales. And that's what was driving growth in New South Wales. And that was the reason why New South Wales was able to, provide all those services, because, all that housing that they built, because New South Wales is one of the growth corridors for housing. There's new suburbs in New South Wales that didn't used to exist. Sure. I've seen them. I wouldn't want to live there, but at least they're there. And they were able to do that because of infrastructure. And now there's nothing. Yeah. So I get really frustrated by what is this really obvious attitude from inside One Nation that the states don't really matter. They absolutely matter. Yeah, okay, we need to stop immigration. That's number one. But then everything else you want to do to support the economy, if you want to really do that, you do it from inside state governments, right? The states could fix the housing crisis faster than the feds can. The feds are running a housing agenda with one hand tied behind their back because they do not approve the houses. So, yeah, it frustrates me. Seeing a lot of agreements in there. normal guy says high-speed train to Newcastle. Dude, you say that, but have you got the train to Newcastle recently? Because in 2007, like I said, I used to work for a guy called Craig Bowman, and I didn't even move. He was up in Port Stephens, and I stayed down in Sydney. I used to live in Chippendale in CBD. And I used to get the train up. In 2007, that train took almost 4 hours. I mean, now it is like you're getting up there on express in like 2. They've halved it, or 2.5, I think. The entire rail network runs better. The roads are better. Like, this is no word of a lie. You'll think I'm crazy for saying this, but the M4 motorway in Sydney is less congested than the Brooker Highway down here in Tasmania. Like, you will go kilometers per hour. You will go faster on the M4 today, which was like the problem child of Sydney. You will go faster on the M4 than you will on the Brooker Highway in Tasmania, in sleepy old Tasmania, for reasons that they've never been able to fully explain. That's my rant for the week. Conquer the World says it's baffling to see that the New South Wales State Liberals go from success in New South Wales to now barely relevant. I mean, there's reasons for it. There's really good reasons why it happened. They took their eye off the ball. They lost a lot of their best talent. It was a slow decline of talent. COVID massively disrupted them and disrupted their plans. I mean, one of the things I don't think people truly appreciate about the New South Wales government was that even in 2020, after 3 premiers in, right? At that point, they were still enacting plans that had been written down in March of 2011. So that was where they really fucked up and where the decline comes in. And I think the decline kicks in when they got re-elected in 2019, was that they never sat down and said, we owe, the cabinet of Barry O'Farrell, Gillian Skinner, Brad Hazard, Andrew Collins, Glasgow Jiggling, Mike Gallagher, Chris Harcher, Greg Smith, the core group and Andrew Stoner and Adrian Piccoli from the Nationals. They owe them this tremendous debt for sitting down in 2011 and saying, well, here's the fucking plan. Here's what we're going to do. Every single thing that they ever said they would do, they did. By 2019, you remember the stadium they campaigned on in 2019? I mean, that was written down back in 2011, right? Metro was underway. That was the year they should have sat down and went, okay, what does the next 8 years look like? What are we going to do for the next 8 years? Because they built all these hospitals, they built new schools, they built highways, they built trains, they made great improvements to state regulations, state planning. Sure, there was some bad things not bad things, but there were some maybe things that were going to come back to bite them, particularly around energy, particularly around net zero, but none of those were insurmountable, and a lot of those came in very late. They never thought, well, we have to do that again. You actually have to do that every 8 years. And it was that failure to do that meant within just 4 short years of the 2019 election, they were an unelectable rabble. I mean, I think had they have done that, you probably could have avoided TLD in a way. It's the biggest state. Had the Liberals remained relevant, at least relevant in New South Wales, it could have been the bulwark against the malaise that they had federally. It could have been the bulwark against the disengagement of the rank and file. Because the only things preventing it, the total obliteration of the Liberals right now, is the Queensland government, the Tasmanian government. Right? They got Chris Foley and Jeremy Rockcliffe. That's it. Now, as whatever happens to those guys next, 2019 was the moment they could have fixed it. Had they have said, well, what do we build next? And no one planned for it. A few people in there were thinking about it, but no one was taking them seriously, because the problem was they'd reached for the sky in 2011. They had done all these incredible projects. And so anything you came up with after that started sounding like science fiction, like fast rail, like second harbour crossing tunnels. Like, you know, at that point, what it was like they ran out of things that they could even do, ran out of things they could tackle. I mean, it was that point where you could have even seen like a campaign from the States on nuclear, right? My pet thing, you know, the Kernel nuclear reactor. Those are the kind of options that could have been on the table. James Eisen, who is one of our smarter leftoids who comes in here, he says, do you think the lack of OMP focus on state elections is because of a lack of talent? They can barely get competent people for federal elections. Imagine the polling shock from a collapsing state branch. I think they handled SA pretty well by just handing off to Bernardi. They seem to be dropping the ball with Vic. I mean, talent's always going to be a problem, but you can paper over bad talent through training and through giving people experience and through, you know, being the kind of outfit that's going to attract good people in the first place. You know, and like I said at the beginning, and like I've said on the show a few times, you know, the biggest strategic problems with One Nation are their biggest moral strengths. You know, One Nation has this kind of self-destructive impulse to preference the guys who were loyal to them during the darkest days, which was most of them, over anyone, any potential Johnny come lately who might be able to help them. Now, tactically, that's really bad. Strategically, I think long term, particularly in an electoral marketplace where maybe the electorate itself isn't that ambitious, it might work out for them, it might not. But geez, it's going to be hairy for them. They're going to hit the shit out of them. Well, the media will anyway. Let's just check on where Brian is because he's late. He hasn't said he's not coming. Yeah, that's my feelings on New South Wales. I still have a lot of thoughts on New South Wales. I do kind of miss it some days. Miss Sydney. But I'm maybe just saying that because it's so freezing cold down here in Tasmania. I mean, I think it was like 3 degrees when I woke up this morning. It was absolutely miserable. What else we got in the chat, guys? Dick Rizzler, great name. TOD was ultimately precipitated in the end because Dutton was actually a really, really nice guy instead of Skull Death Crusher we were promised. You're exactly right. I mean, but again, dude, I go back to my point about why the biggest sin you can commit in Australian politics is being a Christian and being a Christian conservative. It's what terrifies them more than anything. Right? And I think that was Dutton's problem. It wouldn't have mattered what Dutton ever said or did. At the end of the day, he was a Christian conservative. Just like Tony Abbott. It wouldn't have mattered what he said or did. We would not have paid maternity leave in this country if it wasn't for Tony Abbott. Tony Abbott socialized that idea 2-3 years before anyone ever considered doing it. He took it to an election and he nearly blew up his own party room because he was so dedicated to it. But none of that would have mattered. He could have driven to the house of every expectant mother and given them a shopping bag full of cash. And it wouldn't have made up for the fact that he had a wrong spirituality to the spiritually bereft people that secretly run our country. The people that come out of academic institutions, the people embedded in our bureaucracy, everyone who lives in fucking Canberra, that's ultimately the problem. And that's why after immigration, I mean, the second most important thing that One Nation can do is run a hot knife through these institutions and strip them of their power and strip them of their relevance and credibility, whether it's the media or academia or the bureaucracy, and start again with new people. You know? Green Goblin says Moira's tearful video today deserves a mention. I should really get one of you Victorian guys to come on because, honest to God, man, I just do not understand what the hell is happening with that. So she accused Matthew Guy of a headlock that wasn't really a headlock, and it turned out she didn't know what a headlock was. And now the Liberal Party is trying to disendorse her, and now she's trying to sue the Liberal Party, which is not even the third lawsuit that she has triggered with the Liberal Party in the last couple of years. She's trying to go to One Nation don't want her. What the hell is happening in Victoria, the Moy redeeming state? What the hell is going on down there, guys? It's like a witch's curse infected it. Someone keeps asking in the chat if I'm a Christian. Yes, I'm a Christian. And I was for a period of time practicing Catholic, and now I wouldn't describe myself as a practicing Catholic now, but I would describe myself as some kind of mystery meat Christian, if it matters to you. Probably a Christian mystic would be the most accurate description of my spirituality. But it doesn't come up much. And in the last 12 months, I've probably been to a Greek Orthodox church more than I've been to a Prot one. So Walmart Golem says he's Victorian and he's even met Pizzuto in the past. I could have picked you a Victorian, dude. At this point, I do just associate Victorians with this, there must just be no centrists left in Victoria. Must just be no one down there who, is it just seems like there's no one sensible at all. There's no one trying to, and look, I know we criticize this when others, like particularly when the Liberals and the media, etc., have said it. But when we say bring people back to the center, we don't really mean like the Cartesian zero of the political compass. I mean, what bringing people back to the center in the political context I grew up with really meant was a kind of populism and a kind of like adjudicating issues from a position of good faith and coming to compromises that could be, if not agreed with by both sides, but at least respected. And this was the consensus of Australian politics for a long time. Back to the New South Wales thing and why New South Wales has just turning into the same basket case of that Victoria is. It was that desire for consensus in the Liberals that made them a force to be reckoned with for a decade. One of the most important things that ever happened in the Liberal Party, New South Wales Liberal Party history, was in 2008. They held I think it was a state council, and Barry O'Farrell secured a unity ticket between the two factions, and it was a pretty granular agreement. I mean, they all agreed to certain things. The right agreed that it would tone down some of the stuff on the environment. The left agreed that they wouldn't do anything on some of the key culture war issues, like around abortion and euthanasia. They carved up the portfolios based on who was most talented and who could do the best job, and they made sure that around the cabinet table there was an equilibrium, which was maintained even when there wasn't that equilibrium in the party room, because a lot more right-wingers got elected in the 2011 landslide than left-wingers. But everyone thought, hey, this is a good deal. Everyone gets treats. Everyone's lobbyist friends are getting clients. The media like us. The electorate likes us. Why not all just be friends instead of blowing the place up so that, some jort-wearing dweeb from the University of Sydney Liberal Club can get a pre-selection that he doesn't deserve, which is what's been going on in the past and which is now going on again. So, they had that kind of ability to seek a consensus on things. There were a few things that upset it over the years. I mean, they went to the mattresses on electricity privatization, which was something Mike Baird supported, which the moderates supported, which was not something that the liberal right supported. But they had sane debates around it, and the winners would win, and then the losers would go, okay, well, we lost, and then everyone would move on. So when we look at where things have gone south for the Liberals, I mean, that the end of that and that winner-takes-all attitude, the fact that equilibrium was then upset by a third stupider faction, namely with a so-called centre-right under Alex Hawke, I mean, that was just the beginning of the end for them at that point. Consensus became impossible. Compromise became impossible. It became a zero-sum game out in pre-selections. And next thing you know, TLD. I mean, when was the last time you heard of Alex Hawke? So, I mean, if they want to make anyone answer for all this fuckery, he's arguably the guy. That's not to say I don't have a lot of respect for him. I do. He was a good factional enemy and actually a fairly competent minister when he wasn't demanding increased migration, which was a real passion of his towards the end. But ultimately, it's his fault. So, yeah, RIP, New South Wales Liberal Right, 1976 to 2026. I'm thinking that sometime around August, we're going to stop even calling it 2026. It's just going to be like year one on the TLD calendar, like one ATLD. I think that's what I'm going to and maybe I'll start naming the episodes after that. It's clear to me now that Brian's kids are not going to sleep as easily as they have in the past. He sent a message at 8:47 saying, I don't know how many more times I can listen to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star before I die. Brian, if you're listening, just come on and I'll sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to your kids. Grant Gombold says, what did you think of Carl's recent eps? I haven't seen one in a bit. The last time I saw the Piers Morgan one, which was good. I thought that was really good. I mean, I think he's doing really good. But yeah, he says apparently Rupert Lowe was on. I got to watch the Rupert Lowe one. Rupert Lowe was coming in on a laptop or something. I need to get these guys webcams. Or like at least a better setup than I have. Joseph thinks that Mossad got to Brian. If you can, check out Brian's piece on One Nation that he just put on Substack today. Yeah. There's some funny calls in the chat. Well, the one thing that Brian and I were going to talk about was, which I moved to the beginning, was I thought one of the funniest things of the week, the rise of the Naarmgroid, but I kind of wanted to do it when he was here. I don't know if you can post pictures, but we need some facility to post the hottest Naarmgroids in the chat. That thing was just hilarious. And it just went like, that term gets overused, but it just went absolutely viral, didn't it? Like you had some of the biggest accounts on the right in the world retweeting that. And I think the reason was it's just so instantly recognizable. Like the second that went up, everyone just instantly recognized it as a social phenomenon that has been creeping around the edges of Australian society for so long. And it to put the serious hat on, but it kind of like reflects that broader bifurcation of Australian politics that has been going on for so long. And it's, I think it's kind of class-based as well, which is really interesting. I was having this discussion with someone the other day about how class in Australia has become increasingly uncoupled from like the old concept of class as being capital to being more based around agency, which is really interesting to me, right? Because you now have a social phenomenon where, you got kids who from great families, went to private schools, probably got a bunch of money, probably working pretty good jobs. But the social conditions attached to that mean that they have to think and act a certain way to maintain that. And so when you look around our community of miscreants, and when I meet some of you guys in real life, and just the guys you I already know, like agency or a lack of capital, a profound lack of capital, is are the two defining features, right? Because sure, there's a lot of incels and freaks in the movement, but every second guy I talk to has their own successful business or has some, agency in their life where they don't need to care what an office full of DEI managers thinks about them. So, if you work for a Big Four accounting firm, you can't say the things that we say. If you work for the public service, you can't say the things that we say. Especially not under your own name. But Christ, a lot of the time you can't even say it anonymously, in case someone were to get a hold of one of your devices or someone were to dox you. You can't speak to people in public about these things or have these attitudes if you don't think and act a certain way. And I think that's the kind of tragedy of the Naarmgroid, right? Like, you can't look at these guys and you look at the things they say and the way they act, and you got to kind of ask yourself, like, do they really believe it? Like, or is it? I think I saw someone on Twitter say they thought it was a mating strategy, right? Like, if you want to date a white woman in Australia, this is how you have to sound and act. I think that's an element of it, but I think it's more about, you either have to sacrifice, personal agency for, political conformity, or you have to go and get that agency some other way, which is not a great society when you think about it. To have, it's almost like the fucking Handmaid's Tale, but for dudes. Actually, someone should do a Handmaid's Tale Naarmgroid. That could be a funny name. Yeah, and look, it's not about to stop. But it was interesting. Remember when Ozpil came on a few weeks ago, and Ozpil made that point about how, like, he's one of the more moderate voices on his campus in Florida. And yet, like we were saying, like, so many of these guys who are based as fuck, they're still getting the internships at Lockheed Martin. Australia just feels so left behind the global political zeitgeist in so many ways. Which I think is, reflective in every single problem our country's having, and every single bit of weird discourse that's leaking out, whether it's Albanese wanting to shag Kylie Minogue and the mainstream media blowing up about it, whether it's about our macroeconomic settings, whether it's about the government's AI policies, whether it's about the things you see on the news at night, whether it's about, One Nation's kind of wobble that they're having at the moment. I think it all comes back to this point that we're just so far behind the eight ball of where everyone else is, and we're so far behind ideologically. Right? The Naarmgroid was once the dominant ideology of Silicon Valley. Today, the dominant ideology of Silicon Valley is not too dissimilar to mine. So we've seen this massive shift happen, and we're just a backwater in so many ways. But in the meantime, at least we have the memes, and they're funny, and I do get a kick out of them. Just because on the left, like, this is the first time. There's been some, the right have had memes in Australia before, but this is the first one where they've really, really lost their shit about it. I've seen a lot of posting about it. I kind of question whether or not it's real, because it's directly at them. And the kind of performative male culture that we see everywhere in Australia now. The kind of started with remember the guy that they made the t-shirts of, you're a good cunt and you're a bad cunt. Right? Remember that? We kind of started seeing it then. And everyone kind of intrinsically recognized that as well. But this is definitely eclipsed that. Someone just DM'd me a very good Handmaid's Tale Naarmgroid, which I'm going to post on Main in a minute. Actually, I can probably just put it up without Yeah, without like a certain other right-wing political identity who streams without accidentally doxing everyone in his group chat. I can throw this up. So there you go. That's really good to whoever sent that to me. Yeah. The Handmaid's Tale Naarmgroid. I'm gonna tweet that when we get off the stream. Rara says it started with Fitzroy Garage Party. I mean, we were talking to someone about it the other day and was saying like it might have actually started with like Peking Duck, the band. Yeah, Gerald Pym says rare groid. Yeah, a once in a lifetime groid. It was only shown on this stream for a few fleeting seconds. Gerald Pym says quite a few accounts that call themselves right wing were so called out by it. Yeah, weirdly. Yeah. That's why I liked it. I liked the controversy it generated. Theophilus says, John, what do you think the purpose of people like Friendly Geordies and Mr. M history is? Well, I mean, Friendly Geordie's purpose at the moment is making money from the Labor Party. He's back on that grift. You know what? Good for him. I mean, he doesn't even bother hiding it anymore. I think in a way, Friendly Geordies has just kind of become like Labor's much more sophisticated answer to Advance, hasn't he? Like, he's just doing better, more salient content for Labor than Labor can put out themselves in the same way that Advance did that a couple of elections ago. And look, if One Nation is smart, they're going to try and co-opt something similar that isn't Avi Yemeni. Because, there are a lot of guys in new media whose content is just like what the old media would run free of advertising and time constraints. Like, I don't think that's the right way to lean into it. It's the weird shit that does numbers. It's like me with my deliberately shaky camera that doesn't even really shake. I actually jump up and down a bit on the floor so the desk moves every now and then. It's that whole like sitting down at a desk, in your nice studio. I think that moment's over. I mean, the whole reason people consume this stuff is because it doesn't even look like the mainstream media. Conquer the World said, I've said this before, Drew Pavlou, top tier talent, but needs to be consistent with streaming. No, he doesn't, man. I mean, I'm a creature of habit. So once I got into the habit of doing this every Tuesday, I just kept doing it. But I could understand for anyone like even slightly more normal than me, or probably like it's the other way around. I guess like someone who's actually neurodivergent probably really struggles with doing it every week. I deliberately don't talk about politics to a lot of people during the week, so I don't get tired of it. And then I have something to talk about on Tuesdays. Right. Taryn says, new Ozpop Ill Pill slop just dropped. Ozpill stuff's been great lately. What are you talking about? I like Ozpill content. I am worried, though, that I think he is now Australia's most watched politics stream. Not on X, but I think he does do actually better numbers than me. Which, again, I'm only going to mention to you guys in the middle of the show. But I do think he probably is. But we're still going to say it. We just might put it in inverted commas. Yeah, man, I do save the good stuff for you. I certainly save stuff that would have been funnier tweets that I just don't tweet to save it. I was pretty happy with that one I did about the different types of right-wing influencer girlfriend, if you guys have seen it. Tell me in the chat what your favorite genre of right-wing influencer girlfriend is. Someone's already pointed out to me that I skipped over the BPD SSRI addled one. Like, Gerald Pym says, just clip it like a good influencer. Man, I don't know how to clip anything. We get Ozpil back on, actually. I might just message him now and tell me that Brian has dogged me once again. Anyway. It's 9:00. That's probably enough politics. We've had it for the first hour. So let's get into pop culture, guys. The Odyssey is coming out. Everyone's losing their minds about how woke and gross it is. Be interested to get your opinions on woke movies in the chat. I've seen more good movies than bad ones this year. I was thinking, I saw like Backrooms, Obsession, those were good. Disclosure Day sucked. Iron Lung was good. So I'll be sad if the Christopher Nolan movie sucks. One day we're going to get Sir Walmart Gollum on to review Tracy Lord's movies. Because all he talks about every time he comes on. We got more politics questions. Fat Retard, who only gets on because his name's funny. John, thoughts on the rumor that Labor is planning on losing the Vic state election on purpose? Dude, I've worked in politics my entire working life, and I have heard rumors about people deliberately losing elections there's a major election in Australia every 18 months. And so I would say reliably, I've heard it every 18 months. It's never in a million years going to happen. You don't understand the mindset of the establishment politician. Do you know how miserable their lives are when they lose? We were talking before about the Liberals in New South Wales losing because post two elections ago, right? Do you know what those guys who lost are doing now? I talked to heaps of them. Like, I think there's probably like one guy I would describe as a success story. Great guy, Nat Smith, Greg Smith's son. He's like head of the Master Plumbers Association. But in terms of jobs, Matt Keane from the left got a job in the Climate Change Authority, which was hugely controversial and probably doesn't even pay that much. Man, they don't go anywhere. It sucks for him. John Barilaro is a staffer again. I mean, that was the last Friendly Geordies video I saw. John Barilaro works for Ross Cadell. Oh, actually, maybe Canavan. He works for one of them. It sucks being an ex-politician. I had guys ring me. I had guys ring me after 2019 crying because they lost their seats. They went and they thought, oh, well, I can just go and be a consultant. That's what everyone does. But it's a punish, and they're not very good at it. And they don't make any money. Their wives leave them. It sucks, man. And then, like, some of them end up being staffers. I'm not saying Barilaro's wife left him. I don't know, but he and I like John. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, whenever you look at what's going on in politics, your first thought should always be that whatever these guys are doing on the surface, in the background, they are just viscerally, myopically focused on keeping their job. Because for the overwhelming majority of MPs on all sides of politics, and I include the One Nation guys in this, especially include the Greens, this is the best job they will ever have. It is the easiest job they will ever have. And worryingly, for a significant proportion of them, it is the best paying job they will ever have. So this goes to the very heart of why politics in our country fucking sucks. Because the last people you want running your country are the people for whom running the country is the best possible job. Our country was better, it was safer, and it was more successful when the average Australian politician was retired. When there were people who had successful careers, usually in law and letters, sometimes in finance and economics, less commonly in business, or they'd been in the Labor side of politics. They'd already had long careers in the unions and in industrial relations. I mean, which was only a thing until recently. I mean, for the most of Labor's history, they drew from the legal fraternity like everyone else did. There's a total shift in how I say this from personal experience. There's a total shift in how a politician views things when they are near or at retirement age. The risks they are willing to take, the way they adjudicate policies, the confidence they have in themselves, like it's totally different. And we have this scourge in Australia of young people entering politics. You know, I get that parliaments should more or less, represent the electorate, and they always have. I mean, I think I put that thing up on Substack a while ago, and I was talking about Kim Beazley Senior. Kim Beazley Senior came into Parliament at 27 in the 1960s, by which point he was already considered a very accomplished guy and a polymath and someone who would go really far. In the same way that Paul Keating was when he came in. I believe Paul Keating might have come in even younger, at maybe 24. Right? So you will get a proportion of very young people. But the majority of people you should have in Parliament should be at or near retirement age, who've seen some shit and who have a fat superannuation balance. And so when a problem comes up, their first thought is, if I lose my job, I'm never going to have a job as good as this again. Their first thought should be, if I lose this job, I don't need another job again. And, one thing I think people don't talk about enough are the superannuation reforms that politicians did to their own super over the last 20 years. Because when I first started working in politics in the early 2000s, I mean, when a young guy came into Parliament, he was set for life. You had an index pension. You could do 4 years and then go, or 3 years in the feds and then go. And you would walk out of there and you could then do anything you wanted. You could just retire. I mean, a lot of the great politicians from the 1980s and 90s, like not the big names, but like just guys who were kind of workaday Australian establishment politicians. I mean, they went into academia, or they went into business. But they were able to take risks and experiment and take some time off and write because they were well looked after. I mean, Fat Retard says, so Malcolm Turnbull was the last real politician. I mean, yes and no. Turnbull's wealth was absolutely a strength for him, but the circumstances of Turnbull's ascension and the kind of tickets he had on himself, like, again, he was someone who, for completely different reasons, he just couldn't lose and he couldn't take the risks, And I just think fixing that could be something that, could have a profound impact on our parliaments. The people running should not need to do it. Unfortunately, it just kind of reflects broader issues about our economy in a lot of ways, that it is so hard to innovate. Entrepreneurship in this country is so hard. There's cultural resistances, there's tall poppy syndrome. Then on top of that, you've got regulatory issues. You've got this general hostility towards private enterprise in Australia that we've had, even though we've had Liberals in government at every level for more time in the last 50 years than we haven't. We're still one of the most hostile places in the world to private enterprise, which goes back to my point about who the real establishment in this country is, which is academics, bureaucrats, and the media. The places where private enterprise goes to die. I think because of that, because there's no real avenue for advancement for a lot of ambitious people, all they have is politics. I mean, in the United States, you'll become more, if you are a type A personality, if you've got the highest marks you could possibly get in school, if you went to a good college, if you already got a little bit of money, but from a good family, you can string a sentence together. If you don't have any like debilitating mental illnesses and you're more or less not terrible to look at, like, politics is probably the last thing you want to go into. because you're going to be more successful, have more money, have more influence and more power by going into the private sector, particularly in the US's growth sectors, right? And people pivot to that really quickly once they realize it. I mean, I've seen both Palmer Luckey and Karp say this in recent days, how, amongst the culture of tech entrepreneurs in the United States, since Trump got elected, you're seeing this total pivot from the smartest people saying, oh, I want to make an app called Bing Bong that helps deliver shoes or something, to now they're saying, I want to build cruise missiles. I want to build AI that finds spies. Like, I want to go to Mars. Like, you're seeing that kind of pivot because the focus on entrepreneurship is there. Here in Australia, if you want wealth, well, if you're putting wealth aside, which is hard to get at the best, well, you can get it for buying a house. But if you want influence and power, politics is it for you. Politics and maybe the media, if you're willing to debase yourself to that extent. So that's not how a society should look at all. Politics should be a calling. Politics should be something people are passionate about. And, I look at these guys who are in there now. They're not passionate about it. They're not passionate about it at all. I was saying to my business partners this week, we were talking about clients, and I was saying I wanted to talk to people in the health sector. Because, if you look at the Australian health sector, I mean, I think in most states, it's 30% of all employment. It's a little shy of 30% of our GDP. Like, it is the biggest industry in the country is healthcare, pharmaceuticals, the provision of healthcare, putting aside the bullshit about the NDIS, whatever, just healthcare in general. And it's something I know like next to nothing about at all. Because I was never really passionate in it, and it wasn't something that really interested me about politics. And just making a couple of calls to talk to people who do it for a living. And this was another really interesting thing. When you look through the lobbyist registers of all the different lobbyists, of which I am now one, you notice that all these companies that are, in many cases, run by people like me with the same kind of values and the same kind of backgrounds. Like, health is really underrepresented in political lobbying. So then when you actually talk to people who work in the sector, that was a really staggering thing about it, about this industry where people make shit tons of money, which I'm obviously talking about private health and in pharmaceuticals, but they're incredibly passionate about it. And so that's like, an interesting quirk of our system. Like, there are places where passionate people can go, so long as you're passionate about the right things. And so you do see people who are passionate about health. They're not going to go into where health gets regulated. They're not going to go into government. They're going to go into companies that research new medicines, who conduct all kinds of biomedical research, who go into pharmaceutical companies, who deliver aged care, nursing, private nursing, which is a huge industry in Australia, hospital administration, or just clinical practice. It's like, how do you get people like that to be attracted to politics? Which was another thing I think I wrote in that last Substack. And I actually compared it to a surgeon that I met who was clearly incredibly competent and really good at his job. But it's just this head scratcher. Like, how do we do it? John, what are your top 5 books for young patriots? Like on Australian shit or just in general? It's a good question. I might think about that and write something on it. The only really good one I've read this year was Australia Forever by the Collected Essays of Graham Campbell. It was put out by our friend John Lawson. I think this is probably the best Australian political book that's come out this year. Wish Ourselves Away, says the Latham Diaries. The Latham Diaries is a lot of fun. And if you just want a kind of rollicking overview of Australian politics. Yeah, I do heavily recommend the Latham Diaries. So the books that personally kind of molded my political views. I mean, Mishima was probably the one that I read like just right before COVID started. I'd never read Sun and Steel, and I finally got around to reading it, and that probably had an outsized impact on catalyzing the end of my, kind of passive dalliance with liberalism that I'd had for so long. Not that it was specifically like the book that I internalized, but it just kind of like started me off on the journey of reactionary right politics, which was around that time. I think it was around that time that like Bronze Age Mindset and those books come out, which I don't really love Bronze Age Mindset, but this to give you an idea of what my thinking was at the time. There's a really good book that I have in a really difficult to read format, but was extremely formative in my views around politics, more so business, but like politics and business. Matt Taibbi, who you'd probably be familiar with nowadays as a commentator and blogger, but was a serious writer for a long time. And he wrote the famous book on Goldman Sachs and the global financial crisis. Before he went to Rolling Stone to write that stuff, he wrote for a English language newspaper in Russia called The Exile. And there's a book that I think it might even be out of print. I'll see if I could find it. It basically collects some of the biggest stories they did, but it's this fascinating this fascinating artifact of the period in Russia where like a contemporaneous account of the rebirth of capitalism is effectively what he was writing about in that period from like 1992 to about 1997, and how it played out in Russia, and being able to read it in English and being able to read like legitimately good journalism about it was really formative, particularly in Australia and, some of the stupider things that happen here and in politics. And if you can get a hold of it, I heavily recommend reading it. I really liked Mike Marr's Gothic Violence. I think that probably summed up a lot of what all of us were feeling in 2018, 2019. I think out of all the reactionary lit that came out around that period, that's probably the best work. What else was good? I did that whole piece the other day where I was writing about how many like chick politics books I secretly like. I mean, you get some fascinating insights from them. Like reading Julia Gillard's books and, some of those books that they wrote about, like the gay marriage plebiscite, are really interesting. I might write a whole list of those at some point. Someone asked if I've read Dugan, not in the original Russian. Someone said Carl Schmitt is always fun. You know what really frustrates me about right-wingers is how they never seem to have read anything Carl Schmitt wrote after 1945. Carl Schmitt actually repudiates a lot of his own worldview in a series of lectures in the 1960s. And it kind of expands it out to the geopolitics of the time, which is probably more valuable to read than the stuff he wrote contemporaneously with the war. We usually see a poll at some point on a Tuesday night. I'm surprised we haven't seen one. Yeah, Ben just mentioned, remember our mutual friend gave us all copies of Hardball. Yeah, there's a guy called Chris Matthews who was a Democrat Democrat staffer in the United States who wrote a book called Hardball in I think it was in like the early 1990s, that like every single young liberal was made to read in the early 2000s. There is some really interesting stuff in it, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I did actually quote it to someone the other day, because there's a bit in there about fundraising where he talks about how fundraising's kind of like it actually works the opposite of how you think it does. It's not really about people paying you money for favors. It's more like the obligation you feel to help someone when you help them. And it always reminds me of, you don't hear much of him anymore. I don't think he's even written a book in a really long time, but Chuck Palahniuk, the guy who wrote Fight Club, he wrote this book called Choke, about a guy who goes to restaurants and pretends to choke on food. So he like goes into like posh restaurants and pretends to choke, and then a rich person will come up and do the Heimlich maneuver. And then he would wait a few months and then call the rich guy and say how hard his life was. And the rich people would send him money. And it was playing on that exact same psychological impulse that if you help someone, you are actually more inclined to keep helping them. And that's how political donations really work. They don't work like in that transactional sense that I think, midwit journalists actually think they do. That it actually establishes a pattern of behavior of continuing to help someone. Yeah, that Hardball book was actually kind of fun. I mean, back then, you used to get some really good books from the American left. I'm trying to think of that Newt Gingrich one. What was the Newt Gingrich book we all used to read? Ben will remember that. But like a lot of that stuff, a lot of those old books on politics are just not really relevant anymore. The whole world has moved on, and no one's really managed to write anything particularly insightful about the Trump era. Like, I think either the Woodward book about Trump's first 30 days from 2016 was pretty good, I thought. I didn't mind that. The one where he's like doing all the candid interviews and it's Bannon chewing up the scenery in the West Wing. Like, I thought that book was pretty good. And I suspect that that book's probably extremely accurate. Truth is that outside some of the big names, I don't even read that much about politics. Like, just because to be good at my job and it doesn't require you to get that literary about it, I mostly just read for pleasure. And I go back and like books I really like, I'll go back and read like 3 or 4 times. I recently just finished a book that I probably read like once a year whenever I'm on a plane, just because it's really short, and I have it on my iPad, called The Cipher by Kathy Koja, and it's like this extremely obscure horror novel from the early 90s, which is one of the most grimy and disturbing things you can ever read, and like could only be written by a woman. Like this view that I've had for a really long time that women write better horror novels than men do because, women are walking around in a perpetual state of terror. And it's absolutely one of my favorite books. It's one of those books I'm just devastated has never been made into a good movie. If you want to read some fiction. Someone just said like any history. Like, yeah, I'm not one of those guys who reads like a bunch of history books and stuff. I mostly read fiction. At the moment, I'm working my way back through a bunch of old Don DeLillo books that I read once in the 90s and hadn't picked up again. So at the moment I'm reading Underworld again for the second time, because I think I was like 16 or something when I read it the first time. So reading that again. My favorite Don DeLillo book was Libra, the one about John F. Kennedy. It has my all-time favorite line of any book that was ever written, where he talks about the day that Oswald gets arrested. And he said, there is much here that is holy and aberration in the heartland of the real, which would then go on to be the name of the book that Wendy S. Painting would write about Timothy McVeigh. Which, if you want to make, it is like not a history book, but like if you want to read like a contemporaneous history book that is absolutely sublime and excellent. Wendy S. Painting's Aberration of the Heartland of the Real is probably the best book on American culture, on deep politics, on conspiracies, on the fallibility of memory, on court cases. One of the best books that I think has like ever been written. And yeah, if you want to chuck me on a desert island, those are probably the two books I'd take. I'd take Don DeLillo's Libra and Wendy S. Painting's Aberration of the Heartland of the Real. Oh yeah, Ben said Fire and the Fury was the Trump book I was thinking about. We've got some good book recommendations in the chat. Oh, Enoch Bowden, who's our Context Capybara, has popped in to tell me that Choke is also a movie. Really? I wonder when it was made. Is it woke? Joseph S. just said, I'm reading James Ellroy's American Underworld trilogy at the moment. Yeah, which is the absolutely spectacular series of books about JFK and the mob and everyone. But have you seen his recent interviews? James Ellroy's done a couple of interviews lately where he's just super based. Like, you forget that there was once a time where men in literature were actually based. And it's funny to look back, like when he was writing at the height of when he wrote like LA Confidential and stuff like that. Like, he was considered like pop literature. He wasn't highly regarded against his peers. But it's like you pick up those books now and you read them against the slop that comes out now. And like the guy's fucking Cormac McCarthy, you know, which he certainly wasn't considered to be at the time. I think I started reading the American Underworld trilogy like around the third one when it came out, and then went back and just hoovered them all up. Hoover. So our James Ellroy books are spectacular. Yeah, he strikes me as super dark. You couldn't write that these days. I mean, like, you can. It's just, this is the thing, and you can write this stuff. It's just it won't get published, right? And this is the thing that I think has done so much irreparable damage to Western culture, is that, you know, whilst certainly there are some parts of the mainstream media that deserved to have the prestige and credibility stripped out of them, it's kind of ironic how the most prestigious form of media of the last century, which was literature, had all its kind of prestige stripped out of it by not even the whole culture war, just the gender war, right? Like, you had this push by the end of the 1990s, by the beginning of the 21st century, you had this push for like more diverse voices in literature. And out of all the mediums, literature was the easiest place to do that in, because you could just pick who got published, right? It wasn't, you know, the commerciality of it. In the beginning, the commerciality was totally different. I mean, even now when they're making movies, and they have to be woke, but like there is still that element of commerciality to it. You can't make them too woke. You can't alienate the entire audience. Although alienating 20 to 30% of your potential audience is an acceptable trade-off for them, as you say, we've seen with some big Hollywood movies released lately. But the publishing industry was so much different, because like the people who bought the books, they suspected in the beginning, and they were right in the beginning, were going to buy all the books anyway. If you were a person who consumed literature, you were going to consume what the literary journals and what the critics told you to consume. And so it was very easy for the major publishers to just say, okay, well, we're still going to put out a few big names every year, but in terms of who's going to get a leg up, it's going to be women of color and gay guys, and, you know, stories about trans bed rot or whatever they were writing in the last few years. Like, so that's kind of where literature went, and it worked okay for them in the beginning, but then even everyone else stopped reading it as well, to the point where now if you go into a bookshop, which I don't recommend you do, those places are just slop caverns, and you look at the literature section, I mean, none of it sells, and none of it's any good, and none of it's left a single cultural imprint on our society. Like the most important work of literature of the 21st century is probably still like Infinite Jest. Like that, and in a way, probably is like the bookmark or the bookend of like the American literary canon, because after that came out, you have all the prestige stripped out of literature completely. So the generation of young men that used to go into universities and study literature and then produce literature, they stopped doing it because it wasn't prestigious. Why would you do it? You wouldn't win any prizes. You're not going to get any pussy. And let's be like brutally honest about why whole generations of men were attracted to English literature, why they went to uni, why they became authors. It was pussy. Like, every single great book of the late 1980s, early 1990s was written for that reason. You had an entire literary movement emerge out of Los Angeles and New York in the 80s and 90s, which was just young guys, except for Bret Easton Ellis. He turned out to be gay. But it was mostly just young guys trying to get pussy. And they wrote some amazing stuff, like Jay McInerney in particular, who I probably, in retrospect, I didn't, not at the time, but like probably now, I probably enjoyed more than Ellis. But, they left an incredible mark on American literature. Now, that doesn't exist. So because that pathway is not there, no one does it. Where it happens is on Substack. It happens online. It happens, it happened for a brief period of time in guys' blogs. And like Mick says, now every writers' festival headlines Randa Abdel Fattah, who has written some crap young adult fiction. Yeah. So we don't have real literature anymore. You just got to go find it on the internet. And interestingly, I mean, one place where it does kind of still exist, or at least where like interesting ideas still happen, is in genre fiction now. Whereas when like I was a kid in the 90s, genre fiction was genre fiction, and it was pretty sloppy. Like some of it was fun. There was a lot of fun genre fiction that came out, but like it none of it felt particularly important. Whereas now, particularly in horror and science fiction, you do get stuff that kind of feels important and is kind of getting recognized for it. But I mean, like a lot of that starts online. Like I reckon the best science fiction book I've read recently, which I read both versions of, the online version and the published one, is The Memetics Division Does Not Exist, which I heavily recommend you read, which was started as I think it was started as a 4chan post or something. And it's turned into a whole book. So you do kind of see that stuff happening, but yeah, the days of like men of letters, writing serious stuff, they're just over. And it's interesting, like particularly because I go back and reread so much stuff. It's like you go back, and particularly I've noticed this reading Don DeLillo books. It's like you just read some of these paragraphs and you're just like, holy fuck. Like you stop and you go, that's the most well-written thing I've ever seen. Like that's the most vivid description of something I've ever seen in a way that you just don't see from modern literature. And, ironically kind of makes you think, like AI is AI and, people are producing AI slop and whatever, but AI is never going to produce literature like that, even at its most hallucinatory. So maybe as a result of AI, we will see another, maybe it probably won't be this generation, but there's probably some of you young guys in the chat who might well be, going to go to university in the next few years and produce something of that quality. Maybe you'll go study under our friend Dr. Stephen Shavura. Actually, Shavura's history, Stephen McInerney's English literature. Anyway, and I do get angry at the whole characterization about men, like, men wanting to read old books about Rome and shit. I mean, some of the best books of our generation were written by, the works of fiction written by men who've, had an outsized influence on, particularly on Western culture. And the world was a healthier place for it. The other book I'm reading concurrently with underworld at the moment is I'm reading Norman Mailer's Harlot's Ghost, which I think Joseph, who was talking about, about Elroy. If you liked James Elroy but want it with a much bigger dose of big brain shit, Harlot's Ghost covers the same kind of time period as the American underworld period, and it's about a CIA agent reflecting on his time with the agency. I think it might have even been. I read somewhere it was like Norman Mailer's worst performing book. No one liked it, but I really liked it. I found it incredibly enjoyable. What else is on my pile? Oh, the other thing I just reread because it's a really short book that I had on my my bookshelf, and I think if you can get a hold of a copy of it, it's worth reading it through the lens of the things that are happening in our world today. Is J.G. Ballard's Atrocity Exhibition. I found a copy. I'd never seen this copy before. I just found it like at a random bookshop where it actually had like liner notes from J.G. Ballard. So where he kind of explains some of the more obtuse things in the book. So if you can get that version of it, it's a bit more, fulfilling than I think the original was. Anyway, guys, it's 15 to... Oh, wait. I was just about to wrap it up, but someone just said Nigel Farage has resigned? What the fuck? Is that true? I'm looking it up. Has he? He just said, I'll make a statement of my future in public life at 2 p.m. That was 44 minutes ago. Oh, so that's 5 hours. So he vague posted he would do a presser in 5 hours. Yeah. Okay. 2 p.m. London time. All right. I might be up for the soccer, actually. What time's the soccer on? It's not 2 a.m. Who is everyone going for? Argentina or Egypt? I think it's Argentina would be the standard one. I can't believe he resigned. That sounds just nonsensical to me. Like he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, I was ranting about, ICAC investigations before, but like this is my point. Like, this is what they will do to you if you try to rise your head above the parapet of, globalized homogeneity. This is what will happen. Man takes donation. Like a donation that, by the way, is used for security that should be provided by the fucking state. In the same way that Pauline Hanson's security should be provided by the state. You know what he should do if he just wants to really fuck with him? He should announce that he's giving the money back and then accept another donation for the same amount from someone else and just put it on the register. That would be so good if he reopened his Cameo account. We had a friend, I think it was a friend's birthday a couple of years ago, and it was like a toss-up between getting him a Farage Cameo or a Charlie Sheen one. We went with the Charlie Sheen one. It was Charlie Sheen, and he was a big bad guy. But, yeah, that's interesting. All right, well, we will wait and see what happens. Well, sock puppets, sociopaths, and McGoyam, this has been another episode of Stream of Consciousness, your weekly dose of political clarity from Australia's weirdest political commentator. Sans Brian Marlow, who dogged the boys. Actually, I'm just double checking. Also, in case they say otherwise, I noticed that in the chat that Anime Paddy and some of the other grommets were actually watching tonight. So when they say later that they I don't watch it, like I just noticed that they were watching it. We have screen grabs of them. Anyway, it's been fun, guys. Numbers are a bit down, actually. I think I did boost it. Ozpill's probably streaming at the same time, sucking away my numbers. Thank you for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next week. Stay conscious. Oh, I didn't press the button. Hey, this is a funny aside. I got to be careful now when I do the anime outro videos because we got demonetized on YouTube for using, out of everything we've ever said on this stream, it was the song in the Chainsaw Man edit I put up last week, and the stupid Shakira music from the Liberal ad that actually got us demonetized on YouTube, which is hilarious to me. So for your viewing pleasure, we'll just do the Oscar edit because I know that one doesn't get demonetized. We'll see you guys next week.